Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR. And April, as we know, is Fair Housing Month. We've been highlighting fair housing on our social media channels and through our educational opportunities all month. And today we are very excited to have Alexia Smokler. She is the Director of Public Policy, I have something on the screen. Sorry. NAR Director of Fair Housing Policy and Programs on today's show. Alexia, thank you so much for rounding out Fair Housing Month with us.
It is my pleasure for having me.
Thank you so much. So we have a lot to discuss today. Obviously, this is a very important topic, not just in April, but throughout the year, all the time, right? So this is a really important topic, and we're excited that you could join us today because I know you've been giving speaking engagements all month long, but we're happy that you could take time out for Houston today.
Always make time for my friends down in Houston.
Thank you. So before we get into some of the questions I have for you, and I'm sure questions that our members have for you as well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do?
Sure. I work in Washington. So I wear a lot of hats. My hat a lot of different cars. I represent on fair gaps. I also run ACT and
I'm hoping it's just me, Alexia, but I'm having difficulty hearing you. I apologize. Let's see. I know they're on a little bit of a delay. Okay, they are having difficulty hearing you as well. So I'm sorry about that, Alexia. Let's try that again. If we could if we could have you tell a little bit about yourself. I'm not sure why the audio is kind of going in and out for us.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
All right. So I work for NAR in Washington. I'm part of our advocacy team. I advocate Congress, federal agencies. NAR strong support for fair housing enforcement, for policies that close racial gaps. I also run NAR's fair housing program. So things like Fair Haven, bias override. I was behind all of the other initiatives as well. So it's really robust fair housing program here at NAR that I'm privileged to.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And if we continue to have an audio issue, I apologize to the viewers. We'll keep trying to work on it, but it seems like we can hear you now. So one thing that I think during the pandemic, we were seeing some issues. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe the last couple of years? Did the pandemic have an impact on fair housing?
This is an interesting question, and I might come at it in a different way than you were intending. But when the pandemic first hit, and a lot of us were staying home, but there were some folks, the frontline workers, the essential workers who couldn't stay home, we began to see very early on that the pandemic was disproportionately affecting communities of color. And when we looked at those early COVID numbers, they corresponded to old redlining maps. And I think the pandemic showed us it really, in those early days before it spread everywhere and everybody got it, it showed us in those early days really these racial dividing lines in our society that haven't gone away. And that was the backdrop and I felt at that time that in the media it was really obvious to people that the pandemic was having a disproportionate effect on certain people. That was the background for George Floyd's murder in 2020 summer. And I remember thinking at the time that it was sort of a perfect storm in terms of people waking up and having increased awareness around these issues. So, and that has really fueled a lot of our fair housing efforts, is this awakening that we've seen over the last couple of years. Can you still hear me?
Hmm.
Okay, good. So one other comment I wanted to make was the pandemic housing market. Housing blew up with those low interest rates. Lots of people, reassessing, do I want to work from home forever? Maybe I don't need to live in this expensive market, people moving, but multiple offers, people getting priced out. Again, you saw that disproportionately falling on people who have historically been discriminated against. So folks who benefited from that hot market and saw their equity go way up were the folks who have, traditionally been able to own homes and build even more equity. Folks who've been traditionally shut out continue to see themselves shut out. So for me, the pandemic really underscored, the past is still with us and we have a long way to go.
Okay. And do you still find that that is the case today, now that we're in somewhat of a post-COVID world? What types of home buyers or renters are more likely to face housing discrimination today?
So it's hard to get an accurate picture on, the total level of discrimination in the housing market, particularly in because one way we try to get a handle on discrimination is by looking at complaints. Who's filing complaints with HUD? And the vast majority of complaints filed with HUD are about rentals. And the vast majority of those rental complaints are filed by people with disabilities. And that's people seeking reasonable accommodations and modifications. When you're talking about a real estate sales, it's a lot harder to see discrimination. In the past, before the Fair Housing Act, somebody would walk into a real estate professional's office, and it was called door slamming. It would just say, "Sorry, we don't serve you here." That we can't do that anymore. So people will get some service, but are they getting equal service? Well, there's no way to really know how you were treated compared to another consumer unless we do something called testing. So I'm sure you've heard of testing. It's like the secret shoppers, matched pair. That's how we really get a picture on what's going on in terms of how much discrimination is there in the real estate market. And the testing that we've seen, funded by government, funded by academic institutions, show that African Americans experience the most discrimination in real estate sales, followed by Hispanics, if we're looking at the racial breakdown. The LGBTQ Real Estate Alliance also put out a study on the issues that LGBTQ plus folks face when they're seeking real estate.
Okay. We were fortunate in 2020 to have Bill Dudman, who is behind the Long Island Divided investigation, on our program, and we saw some of the clips from that investigation. Is NAR kind of getting into that space of testing?
We are actually. We have a self-testing program as part of the ACT initiative, which involves a broker saying, "I want to test my own agents and see what's going on." You don't know what you don't know. Now, our testing program is confidential. There's no cases that will be filed or no enforcement. What happens is that a broker says, "Yes, I want to do this." We connect them with a testing agency that we have a contract with, and then they are tested, and then they receive a report and some training, and they can take whatever remedial action the broker thinks is necessary. So we tested this test. We piloted this testing program last year with our first broker, and we're now into our second broker this year, and we're ramp up this program. There's a lot of interest.
I'm sure there is. And is that, I mean, you said it was a piloted program, so is that now open to anyone that might be interested in accepting that challenge or taking on that program?
I wish it were. We're limited by the capacity of our nonprofit partner. So
Mm-hmm.
they're hiring more people to do this work for us. So I'm hoping in future years we'll keep building capacity, but right now it's still, a handful of brokers each year that we're doing this with.
Okay, well, that will be wonderful if we're able to roll that out to more in the near future. Going from the broker level to the agent level, are there phrases that realtors should try to avoid in listing descriptions, maybe about the specific property or about the neighborhood?
Yes. So this is a topic that I get a lot of questions about, and I have a presentation on it that's become very popular. So those red, yellow, and green lists that you see of words and phrases, none of those were written by HUD or NAR. They're produced by all kinds of different sources, LSs, by realtor associations, by nonprofit groups. So I would not rely on a list that you find on the internet. And this
Okay.
is why. Um, it's hard to create a list that can tell you words that are always good or always bad in certain circumstances because so much depends upon context. So in the presentation that I give, I try to teach realtors about what the Fair Housing Act analysis is when you're trying to determine whether a word or phrase is legal or illegal. And the question is, are you sending a message to an ordinary consumer? So not someone who's super sensitive, but just the regular average person that they are not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at an example like a Confederate flag. So this was a recent issue in our professional standards committee. If you, let's say your seller has a Confederate flag in their house and you include the picture of that in your MLS listing, um, I think it's pretty in 2023. It's pretty clear that the average African American person seeing that picture could conclude reasonably, I might not be welcome at this property. I might be discriminated against here. This is not a place, that I want to go to. Um, Now compare that to master bedroom. Now I know master bedroom was a big deal in Houston. Now, does it necessarily send the message, you are not welcome here, you will be discriminated against according to the Fair Housing Act standard? I think the answer is no, but I encourage people to go beyond the minimum the law requires, because if that word makes people uncomfortable and there's a more accurate word like primary bedroom, why not use that word? So back to, is there a list of words and phrases? No. The general rule is describe the property, not the people that you think should be living there. So you'd never say ideal for blank. Don't imagine someone in that property, right? Advertise to everyone, not someone. Um, that's the main rule of thumb. Describe the property, not the people. Of course, you never want to say anything about the demographics of the neighborhood, coded language included. It's totally cool to talk about accessibility features of the house. Stick to those rules and you'll probably be okay.
Okay. What about I guess you mentioned coded words. So would safe neighborhood or quiet neighborhood, would that fall into that category of words that we should maybe avoid?
Yeah, these questions, there are no simple, hard, and fast answers. But so
Mm-hmm.
let's talk. So quiet, I feel like is objective. Is it loud or is it not loud? But safe seems kind of subjective to me. Like, there are neighborhoods that people call quote unquote safe, maybe because of demographics.
Mm-hmm.
But those Amazon packages are getting stolen off those porches. So how safe is it?
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely say
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And just a comment that came in that we are, yes, very fortunate that our MLS system actually flags any listing that might have phrases or words that could be seen as discriminatory. So we do flag those and notify the listing agent so that if a correction needs to be made, they can make it. So yes, great point. That came in from har.com. If you have any questions for Alexia, please type those in now. I, of course, still have questions for her, but we'll try to get as many questions answered today as we can. And again, Alexia, we thank you for this information. It's obviously very important for our members to hear. Let's kind of move into the landlord territory. You mentioned that rentals, specifically with people with disabilities, is an issue. So, what is a landlord's responsibility when it comes to fair housing laws?
There are many, and I think that the landlord actually has a lot more responsibility. They're not just the property and then the transaction is done and dusted. They're now managing the property and dealing with these people potentially for years. So all kinds of problems could arise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think number one is, first of all, your marketing. Are you sending any kinds of messages in your marketing, or are you targeting your marketing in a way that is landing with one demographic group but not another?
Mm-hmm.
Um, then, how are you dealing with prospective applicants? So steering is not just an issue in real estate sales. There is steering in rental too. Like maybe you're steering all the families with children over into one building, or we have seen cases of a landlord owning a few buildings, and they would steer people from one race into one building and one race into a different building. So when people come to see the property, are you showing them all the units that are available to them? Are you holding some back? You need to be showing everybody the same units and treating everybody the same. If you have multiple units with multiple people applying, you need to really have standardized practices and procedures for client intake to make sure
Mm-hmm.
you're asking everybody the same questions and treating everybody the same. These are just guardrails for you.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it comes processing applications, what is your procedure for that? Is it standardized? If you're just going on your gut of, well, I like this person, you could be headed for a world of trouble. So you need to have a standardized procedure where you're using objective, necessary criteria to evaluate your tenants. I heard
Mm-hmm.
one story of a property owner who would sit and let a lot of applications come in and then pick and choose amongst those applications, although they were presenting it that it was first come, first serve. So if you're picking and choosing, what criteria are you using to pick and choose? Are those objective criteria? Then once the tenants are in, yes, the reasonable accommodations and modifications for people with disabilities is a big one. You should really make sure you're familiar with HUD's guidance. Also, NAR has guidance on what your obligations are, what kind of information you're allowed to request from a tenant, whether you're allowed to charge them. The whole thing with animals, you need to understand,
Mm-hmm.
the different pet, a service animal and a support animal, and the different ways to treat those. So there's a lot of homework to do if you're a property manager, but we have all the resources available on nar.realtor, and the HUD website also has a lot of it.
Great. So some of the points you were making in relation to intake sound familiar to what we've heard about realtor safety and how realtors are taking those leads. Obviously, realtor safety is a very, very important topic that we also try to focus on year round. But can you speak a little bit to that as to realtors and how they intake leads?
Um, but not the safety of fair housing issue.
Yeah, from a really just a standpoint of having the same procedure for all and
I
how
think
that works.
it's all about having standard procedures in place. When you
Mm-hmm.
have discretion, when you're going with your gut, that's where implicit bias can come in into this scenario. And we all have implicit biases. Our brains need these shortcuts to function in a world where information is coming at us all the time. We need these mental shortcuts. But the problem is when our mental shortcuts are based on stereotypes. And
Mm.
so if you don't have these guardrails in place of standard policies and procedures to follow, those biases can creep in and influence our decision making.
Okay, thank you for that. So, what role just can realtors play in ensuring fair housing for everyone? What can we be doing?
So I want to take this a step beyond compliance with the law, and let's and making sure we don't end up in realtor jail. I think that is the bare minimum. Okay, following the law, not getting in trouble, that's the minimum you can do. What
Hmm.
more um, particularly for those communities that have historically been discriminated, so they don't have the generational wealth. They may not have funds for down payment, though they may have, a good income. Our credit scoring system does not really accurately measure people's credit worthiness when it doesn't take into account their biggest monthly expense, the rent. Although
Hmm.
I'm happy to say that Fannie and Freddie are now updating their credit scoring models to look at things like rental payments and utility payments to get a better picture of the credit worthiness of the buyer. So, what more can we do? If you have a buyer who's coming to you who's maybe not quite ready or needs a little extra help, have a place where you can refer them. Don't just send them away. Find out who your local HUD certified housing counselor is. Maybe you want to take some courses and learn about your local down payment assistance programs. Make relationships with your local lenders who can work with folks who need that little extra help to get over the finish line. I would say that's where this needs to go. Compliance with the law is the minimum. Let's do more.
Okay, excellent. So, where can people file a complaint if they suspect discrimination? And this could be a consumer filing the complaint or a realtor filing a complaint. Where do these complaints get filed?
So you have a lot of options. You can file a HUD, and they will look at your complaint for free. I assume Texas and in Houston, perhaps you have state, local authorities, civil rights commission. You could file a complaint with them. There are also private fair housing groups, community groups. They're all mostly under the umbrella of the National Fair Housing Alliance. So if you look on their website, you can see if there's a local group in your area. Regarding appraisals, which we haven't talked about, a new national appraisal complaint hotline has just been set up. So if you suspect discrimination in an appraisal, there's a national number you can call. If you just Google it, you'll find it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We had a question come in from Mia. She asked, are landlords allowed to change the listed lease amount when it is determined a prospective leasee has a housing choice voucher, increasing lease amount from $1,480 to $1,700?
I am not an expert in the housing choice voucher program, but I can refer you to someone who can answer that question. I want to share that with you.
Okay, very good. So we can always come back and get that information to you in the comments, Mia. So thank you for that question. If there are any other questions for Alexia, please type them in now. Alexia, where can realtors learn more about this topic?
Well, of course, I've got to send you to our website, nar.realtor/fair-housing. We've got so much great information. Our research team just published its latest snapshot of race and home buying in America. If you're a data nerd, we've got a lot of policy stuff on there. We just released 3 new short videos on implicit bias that you can maybe use in an office meeting. They're 5 minutes long. Um, I think the HUD website is really great. You'll find a lot of information there. The National Fair Housing Alliance is another good resource.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And we did share the HUD website link in the comments, as well as the direct link to the fair housing information on NAR's website. Alexia, again, we really appreciate your time this morning. I know we had a little bit of some technical issues with the audio, but we pushed through it and it sounded great. Is there anything else that you want to share with our members today?
So let's see. So many things. Okay, if you haven't seen Fairhaven, our interactive fair housing training, please do. It's free. You can access it at fairhaven.realtor. It takes about 60 to 90 minutes to complete. Christina, I'm sure you've heard members talking about it, but it's very popular. It's fun. It's engaging. We've also got a new fair housing course out, Bias Override. It's a 3-hour CE course where you can learn more about how our brains take shortcuts and what you can do to override bias. Other than that, my parting word is, you know, let's go beyond. Let's go beyond compliance and close homeownership gaps and heal historic wounds.
I love that. Let's go beyond. That's such a great way to think about it, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I did want to mention later today, actually at 12 noon, there is a webinar that HAR is putting on. Your doubt doesn't define me. We've shared the link to it in the comments if you are interested in signing up for that webinar. It's related to this topic, but more with realtor discrimination and realtors unfortunately being discriminated against. So we encourage people to look into that class. Jennifer asked, how do we access the 3-hour CE course that you mentioned?
If you go to trainingforre.com, you can look and see if it's being offered in your area. If it's not, then ask Christina to talk to her fellow staff members to bring it to your area. Oh, and I have to put in one more shameless plug, which is that tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, we will be having our NAR Fair Housing Month event where we will be highlighting our fair housing champions and having some expert discussion on how do we go beyond to close these gaps.
Very good. We will be tuning in for that. Thank you. And we can share that link in the comments as well. Well, Alexia, again, I appreciate your time this morning. This has been really helpful. Again, fair housing is something that we need to be thinking about year round, but April really allows us the time to really shine a light on it. And I know you've been busy this month shining a light on it all over the country. So we appreciate your time in Houston today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, that is it for this Member Focus Monday. We will be back next Monday at 9 a.m. So be sure to tune in. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.